Hello, and welcome to e-DIRAP Hangout on Climate Change and ICTs. I'm Christine Apicol, and together with Carol Youssef, we're part of the e-DIRAP team that will be hosting this Hangout. Today we have with us experts from 4 different countries, knowledgeable in different aspects of ICTs and climate change, coming together to talk about the wide spectrum of issues surrounding climate change and ICTs. That may include environmental management, energy conservation, smart agriculture, sustainable urban development, disaster risk reduction, and so on. And it may include really high-tech initiatives like wireless sensor networks and smart technologies, but also low-tech and equally effective solutions using community radio and text messaging. So there are also other issues related to e-waste and green growth and more. So this group is going to help us make sense of it all. So today we'll talk about what's happening in this arena of climate change and ICTs, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, who's doing what and what's possible now and in the near future. We're also going to touch upon some of the challenges faced in the use of ICTs to address climate change issues, and what are some of the recommendations for the way forward. Today's Hangout will be for about 1 hour, and we'll begin with a round of introductions, followed by 40 minutes of discussion among the panelists. I'll begin with some questions, and there'll be a chance for the panelists to ask each other questions. And in the last 15 minutes, the panelists will answer questions from the viewers. So to the viewers, please post your questions and comments on the e-DIRAP Google Plus page or on the e-DIRAP YouTube channel. Cairo will be monitoring your questions. Cairo, can you just say hi so that everyone knows who you are?
Hi, I'm currently the moderator for this video session. So at the end of the session, I'll actually be taking questions, and from your questions either posted on the Google Plus events page or directly on the YouTube channel, and sharing it with the panelists. So if you have any questions now, feel free to post your comments on the YouTube channel or the Google Plus page. Thank you.
Thank you. So now let's start with introductions by our panelists. So you have 10 seconds to tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do. So let's start from the left. Changsup.
Okay. Hi, this is Changsup Shim. I'm working in Seoul, Korea, at Korea Environmental Institute. Actually, I'm not familiar with this type of the communication, but hopefully my message and the discussions will be successful today.
Thank you. And Gabby?
Hi, is this better?
Yes.
Hi.
Can you?
I'm Gabby, and I'm working at the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center in Bangkok. And I work in the field of climate change adaptation, specifically in disaster risk management related issues. And I look forward to using this technology and meeting everybody.
Thank you. Manoj, glad you can join us. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Manoj Kumar Gupta. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Manoj Kumar Gupta. I'm assistant professor in computer department in Kathmandu University. I have been in teaching profession since 2004, and it's my great pleasure to get involved in these hangouts with you all. So I will try my best to share the experience related with climate change in Nepal. So hope it will be a good platform for us to share the current scenario of Nepal with you all.
Thank you. Richard?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Richard LaBelle. I'm a consultant. I work on the issue of use of information communication technologies as a tool for development, and more recently on the use of ICTs as a tool for sustainability. And in particular, we're looking at the use of ICTs as a way of promoting the use of clean technologies as a tool for climate action. My background's in the biological sciences, but a lot of the work I've been doing recently has to do with helping countries develop strategies and plans to use ICTs for development. And most recently, we've done work on beyond clean tech and sustainability and climate change. We're working on trade enhancement and also e-governance. And I'm based here in Canada outside of Ottawa.
Thank you. Chin?
Hello, I'm Chin Sek Yoon from Malaysia. I'm probably the least expert of this entire panel. I'll try to speak up for the people who are the front lines of the climate change. So do not expect expert opinions from me. The reason you don't see my image is I am having connectivity problems that all of us in the third world do face, and therefore you just see screenshots now and then from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so as I mentioned in the beginning, climate change and ICTs is such a broad topic that requires involvement of many sectors and disciplines. So I'd like to ask the panelists, what framework have you used to help a layperson understand climate change and the ways in which ICTs can be used to address climate change challenges?
Maybe I could say something. Go, Gabby, go ahead.
I'll just be quick first, and then I look forward to the other panelists. But in ABTC, we use ICTs mainly for modeling. There's a lot of modeling, computerized modeling that's done to get an idea of climate futures for each of the countries that we work in. So we try to help developing countries in Asia and the Pacific determine to some extent what their possible futures would be, how this would have effects on disaster risk and on livelihoods and crops and people's safety, and then making plans to address those potential issues. So we use ICTs mainly as a tool, first of all, so that we can help narrow down the envelope of possibilities that will happen in the future. That's it for now. And over to Richard.
Yeah. When people are concerned about climate change, especially in the developing world, the issue really has to do with some pretty basic facts of life. For example, the cost of energy. We're doing work in Chad right now, which is a Central African country, which is a relatively poor country, very dry country. Price of energy is extremely high. So when we talk about ICT as a factor of, let's say, production and the main issue that they would be interested in, how can that help sort of reduce the cost of what they do in terms of electricity use. So one of the things that we encourage is, or we try to highlight, is the fact that, for example, in buildings, there's an awful lot of energy used for air conditioning and so on. It's not used very efficiently. With a few control systems based on ICT, wireless networks and so on, it's possible to dramatically reduce the cost of, let's say, air conditioning. We did some work with ITU recently, about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, in Cairo, where they have several severe problems of energy use. People go into the streets in the summertime because there's not enough energy to power their air conditioning units. We did a quick survey of a few buildings, and we found that there's absolutely no controls over the air conditioning units. So they work day and night, and they keep on, and they consume an awful lot of energy. Simple use of ICT could help to better control the use of energy for air conditioning, for example. That is an example that strikes. That makes a lot of sense to people who live in hot, warm countries, and even people who live in cold countries, because the converse applies. You need energy to heat the place. Efficiency is important. ICTs have a very big role to play in moving countries, communities, even homes and individuals and businesses, moving them in the right direction in terms of reducing their costs, limiting the amount of energy that's not used efficiently, and in particular, overall, reducing emissions associated with energy consumption in the built environment, which invariably in developing countries depends on fossil fuels.
Thank
So
you.
the important link is ICTs and something concrete like energy efficiency.
Great, thanks. Anybody would like to add to what Gabby and Richard have said?
Yeah, I agree to some part of Gabby and as well as Richard. In countries like Nepal, we have been facing so many climate change issues related with that of how we can maintain the situation using ICT. Some of the organizations and even NGOs, they are working a lot to improve the situation of climate change, reduce the effect of climate change in the country like Nepal. We have been using ICT for the agriculture as well to tackle some of the situations to get the better productivity. Some of the organizations in Nepal, basically the government organizations that Nepal climate change related activities are focused by the Ministry of Science, Technology and Environment. And some of the NGOs are also working in order to work for the better, uh, I mean, solution for the climate change. And some of the projects are also running in order to maintain the problem with the climate change and by some of the NGOs in the government like Nepal. So I hope we are trying our best to tackle the situation of such natural calamities and occurred by the climate change. So hope this situation will be better tackled in near future using ICT in the country like Nepal as well. That's I feel like I should share with you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience in what Nepal is doing in the area of climate change and ICTs. Could other panelists also share some of the initiatives or ICT innovations that you are involved with in developing or that you're aware of? Particularly initiatives that have the potential to be replicated or scaled up in countries of this region.
Hi.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'll speak later.
Oh yeah, Changsu?
Okay. Actually, ICT is also very important tool to respond to the climate change, like adaptation issue. In my country, actually, many people used smartphone, and which is a kind of a very strong tool to communicate in situation of the disaster. For example, a lot of the very serious situation of flooding or like hurricanes. Actually, we spread out all very specific information of warming. So people use their own smartphone and cell phones, and they communicate. Actually, our country actually developing a lot of the diverse applications to use the communicate and disseminating the very the useful information to react the many cases of disasters. So this is a very like a useful the way to the response to climate change issues in terms of adaptation.
Thank you. Chin?
Hi. I find that some of the most important users of ICT right now are the policymakers in the country, not so much the people at the front lines, whom I'll speak about later, but the people I think we could support right now with any kind of ICT technologies are actually the policymakers. In the instance, I worked with two Southeast Asian countries, and they are people who are managing the effects of climate change. And the area I worked on was actually on the outbreak of diseases. So when I arrived in one particular country, I'm not going to refer to countries in particular because a lot of the work is done in confidence, I found that the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister himself had to declare epidemics if that was epidemic. And I found that he was being fed pages of statistics from the Health Ministry, and it was statistics that I myself found hard to make out. So one of the things we did with ICT was to take all those statistics that the Prime Minister got on stacks of paper and actually visualize it on a GPS map. The advantage of a GPS map is policymakers are used to looking at maps, and you could actually see issues with diseases very clearly on maps. So that has proven to be useful to take out from my friend from Korea that the handphone was a powerful tool, we found out. One of the issues with statistics coming out of developing countries is the difficulty of ensuring that the statistics are correct. And you have heard of instances where people who collect statistics go out to the field with stacks of form and they just fill them out, sometimes not going to the sites themselves. So the approach we did was to make sure that the statistics that were filled out were GPS marked. and then transmitted via smartphones back to a central location. And these statistics were uploaded in real time onto a GPS map. So I found out that it is workable and very useful, and policymakers are able to look at maps and make decisions. And on those maps, in addition to the data on the effects of a disease or climate change degradation, we also put in place assets that policymakers could use to address crises that arose from climate change degradation. In the case of outbreaks of diseases, we also put in place locations where stockpiles of vaccines were, so policymakers could see how far aid could reach. And the long term I found was that the data collection could essentially be decentralized away from government officials to maybe members of the civil society who had a smartphone of some kind to which they could load an app. I'll stop there and maybe come back to the frontline view later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share their experience or their work in this area?
I can add just very quickly just a comment in regards to on the adaptation side. One of the most useful applications, and it's been around for actually many, many years, one that has been made even more accessible and more efficient through the widespread adoption of ICT is a form of distance early warning system called the famine early warning system. Famine early warning system is a system of satellite-based sensors that collect data on the progression of the growing season and in relationship to rainfall, and this applies in particular in dry areas. It's used in Africa and it's used in Afghanistan, among other places. And what this does is allows decision makers, and eventually we're hoping it will be useful at the local and community level, allow farmers to understand at what stage of the let's say the agricultural growing cycle they may be, not so much in terms of the calendar, but in terms of the weather and the soil moisture calendar, so that they can get an idea of the likelihood of success in the of their crop, and therefore plan accordingly. And humanitarian aid agencies can also prepare for dealing with issues when there's a shortfall in food production. So ICTs can have a very, very significant role to play here. And the other area which is highly relevant from an adaptation and mitigation perspective is the use of ICTs in association with, and then mostly mobile phones, in association with automated weather stations, so that products such as microinsurance can be adapted to the needs of smallholder farmers and help to increase their survivability under conditions of drought and other stresses. So the combination of automated weather stations, wireless signals, wireless devices, and appropriate applications, many of which now exist, can help to make the farming enterprise and small-scale farmers in dry parts of the world which are under stress from climate change, help to make their operations more sustainable by guaranteeing through microinsurance products that are delivered and in some respects managed using mobile networks, by allowing these products to be available to ensure their production and the survival of their operations.
Thanks. And what about you, Gabby? Because you're from ADPC, you have this regional perspective on what different countries are working on in this area of climate change. Could you share some of your experience?
Well, at the moment, we are working on improving early warning systems in several countries. And some of these are being linked to the computer modeling that I mentioned earlier, so that 30 years from now, 60 years from now, up to 50 years from now, and so on, to get a general picture of what the climate would be like. And then we can scale up the early warning system so that we could meet whatever shocks there could be in the future. So then, using forecasting projections, for example, you can figure out which new areas would be exposed to more rainfall, potentially more flooding, or what areas would there be decreased rainfall, potentially drought, and then you can develop drought early warning systems there. So we look at the future for 30 up to 150 years from now, and then try to develop realistic steps to address this. And then, is it okay if I segue to another issue about some exciting initiatives that are on the ground now that we're developing with our partners?
Sure.
Okay. So, for example, I'm working on an urban climate resilience project with Semarang City in Indonesia. And one of the major problems in that city is flooding. And the city has quite a bit of a slope. So in some areas, they have flash floods. So the lead time is not very large. It could be just 10 minutes. So at that point, they're developing improving their disaster preparedness. Since early warning is not realistically, it cannot be realistically extended for now. And then midstream, they're working on adaptation because the expectation is that there will be more water there. Future. And then at the coast, they're going to be looking at sea level rise. So from the combination of the information that's being developed, we can see how in one city they have different challenges at the coast, midstream, and up the slope. So then you get to anticipate this, and then rather than having a uniform disaster preparedness plan, you realize as a city manager that you have to have different approaches for different parts of your city. So that's one thing that I find exciting from the scientific side. But from the community level, the local university there is developing their own river level monitors and their own rainfall gauges. Since they have a local engineering faculty, they just made their own instruments. And they use SMS instead of SMS is telemetry. So then through SMS, they will send a level to a centralized database in the city. And it's not very expensive because of their approach. And then they can locally maintain it. So they don't need to purchase the equipment from abroad, and they don't need externals to come and fix it. They just do it themselves. So that's another kind of adaptation, learning to rely on your local resources and your local technology. It doesn't have to be the best. It doesn't have to be cutting edge. It just has to be functional. So they're using a combination of laser for river levels and SMS. And then for the rain gauge, they have the usual tipping bucket kind. So they just collect water in a lever, and then it tips, and then they know how much rain they collected. And then the SMS tells them how often this happens. So it's quite interesting. They're just using their own ingenuity for this. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to know. Yeah, sorry, yes, Chin.
Could I just jump in and just back up Gabby's point that a lot of the ICT need not be cutting edge nor high tech. As she said that, I was just reminded of the case in Asian tsunami not so many years ago, where the village that was saved from a tsunami, probably the only village on the coast of Tamil Nadu in southern India, was a village with a very simple system. And this was something done by the Swaminathan Foundation. Somebody in the village who had an internet connection would look at the weather forecast for the day, and would just announce it over a loudspeaker system. And because it's a beach community, a loudspeaker system carries a long way. And on that day, I think people had heard that there was a tsunami had happened in Penang, where I am, and just off Sumatra, and was able to give the village 4 odd hours advance warning. And I'm told by the people who worked with that village that nobody was actually killed in that village as a result. Probably the only village that survived in that way. So it's not high tech. It was just somebody with a computer somewhere and with an old-fashioned loudspeaker system. Yeah. So I back up Gabby on that instance. Yeah. It's not fancy apps. It's just very smart use of whatever you have in your backyard. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to now turn to ask the panelists about what are some of the stories that you can share to better understand the risks and the challenges involved in the implementation of ICT solutions to address climate change issues? So talking about, what are the challenges or the issues that people should be concerned?
I want to talk about the people kind of behind the ICT technology. Like others say, is kind of vulnerable people, which is another important issue in my country, because most of the people in my country use the mobile phone, but the vulnerable people, poor or very old people, are probably not friendly to use those kind of high technology. So in case of a disaster or like a very severe weather condition, even though the government broadcast and disseminate the warning, but those people probably sometimes cannot access to the very important information. So in the case, the like offline activity or the is very important. So my government also try to like this kind of a backup system for this kind of behind people. So this is another the aspect we have to remember.
Thank you.
Yeah, may I jump in?
Sure.
I think climate change processes and effects are not going to be pretty. I think we're going to see lots of conflict. And I think speaking for the people from grassroots, I think we are going to use ICT really to advocate for solutions to some of the climate change problems we will face. So you're going to see quite a conflict-laden process if ICT reaches everybody, especially the people on the front lines who are feeling the effect. Now, what I'm afraid of is looking at the region right now, governments are beginning to say, because of political conflict, I think more, that they need to censor the internet to bring about peace and harmony in countries. I think that's a very bad move. And if this is a forum for policy change, it's one policy change I hope will not happen, where governments step in and regulate the internet to a large scale, because that would essentially cut out a lot of the feedback you're going to get from the front lines where climate change effects are being felt. So, and it's a case that's ongoing, it's playing out in more than a couple of countries in Asia, where there are moves to censor and curb the freedom on the internet.
Yes, go on, Richard.
Let me just say a few things. I think one of the real, I guess, lessons that needs to be learned about using ICTs, I think Chin suggested this, is that it should be a simple technology, should be readily accessible, and the most readily accessible of these technologies, of course, is what you might call the earlier sort of generation of mobile communications, would be 2G, second generation mobile communications, which is still prevalent in many of the developing regions of the world, although 3G is catching up and even beyond 4G. So Intranet is really not a tool that people use in their day-to-day lives, especially in the more rural parts of the developing world. So SMS-based applications become extremely important. So something that's usable by people who are adopting the most highly, say, popularized internet information technology and mobile phones, along with radio. We talked about community radio briefly earlier on. And these types of tools, I think, are the ones that can have the greatest impact at the local and community level. And as we move towards greater usage of smartphones and therefore 3G and 4G, then applications that can be associated with climate action become increasingly important, especially if they are adapted to local needs and circumstances, and preferably, and I believe Gabby suggested this or mentioned this in terms of the sensor networks she was mentioning and the work that she's doing. If these applications are developed locally and made available to deal with local climate action type initiatives, and these would be, for example, what is the most useful, let's say, crop to use, what cropping system works best, what agroforestry systems may be most appropriate, where the information exists, lessons learned, and tools that can help extension agents better deliver services that can help farmers deal with climate impacts. So, and the climate liabilities as well. So I think those types of technologies need to be considered in the first instance. And then as you move into the more urban environment, you'll need, where you will find most likely a higher level of bandwidth and a higher quality of internet access as well. Then we can look at higher levels, more sophisticated types of applications. We'd also probably more likely to find the technical and managerial skills to allow for the best use of those applications in the urban environments. So those are, I think, some of the issues that really have to be concerned. We have to be concerned about. I mean, we're working, as I said, in a very poor country in Central Africa, Chad, and we're looking at electricity use. And one of the key issues is, well, how do we make better use of renewables? And because today renewables, especially solar, offers a significant opportunity as an alternate energy production system, because the cost of solar panels has dropped so much and their efficiencies have increased to such an extent. So the question is, how do we make this available to poor people? I'm not sure to what extent ICTs have a role to play in this, although we are now seeing that one of the greatest ways of transforming or providing greater access to electrical energy in rural landscapes in the developing world is by working with mobile service providers who need base stations that are, let's say, run on renewable energy. And there's some suggestion that in rural areas you can use the energy generated renewably, let's put it that way, for a base station, a mobile base station, use that energy at the local and community level. So there's an indirect connection to ICT in terms of looking at providing more renewable and less polluting and carbon emitting energy solutions even in rural communities by associating these with the base stations of cell towers, of which there are hundreds in most countries, even the poorest countries. So that's an interesting take on how ICTs have what I'd consider to be an indirect impact in terms of fighting, let's say, energy inefficiency and, by extension, providing a stimulus to climate action.
Thank you. I'd like to now open this up and give the opportunity for the panelists to ask each other questions. Are there any questions among the panelists?
Yeah, I have some questions. Chang-Sub, Korea has been doing an awful lot of really very interesting work in terms of deploying ICT for climate action in general, and Korea is at the fore of this green growth initiative, much of which is focused on the use of ICT, because Korea is also a champion of ICT. Are there any? Are you involved in your work at your institution in looking at, let's say, some of these applications, wireless sensor networks, next generation networks, and so on, from a Korea perspective? Do you have any insights you could share with us on the use of ICT for smart grid, smart buildings, and so on, from a Korean perspective?
Actually, I'm not directly involved in those kind of high technology area, but I'm just a little bit involved, got some information from the policy side. And probably the Korea government probably touch every aspect you already mentioned in the smart grid and the technology and the ICT technology. And in my side, in terms of adaptation, we try to build up the information system in terms of adaptations, which means that the government try to handle all the different aspects of information related with the climate adaptation, because all those sorts of information is belongs to the different institutions. So it is probably very difficult to handle in terms of very diverse impact of climate change. So government try to handle those information in one side, like very more efficient use of those kind of pieces of information. So this is another Korean government to try to build those information handling. This is one, and the other stuff is we try to build on the like alternative energy sources, like which is kind of nuclear power, or some of the like the energy system like a smart grid. But we are like in energy side, we are still the way to find out more wise use of those energy, because in like the nuclear power, we have an issue right now of the security issues, like which is kind of we have some accident to kind of the corruptions, something to do related with some like the management of those the nuclear power. So this is another issue in my country. And the other issue of the smart grid is kind of a stage of developing. So it is not in widely used in my country. So I think it may take some time to talk about more details.
Well, thank you so much. That's very useful information.
Any other questions?
Christine,
yes,
if I may, not so much a question to the panel, but just a question to members of the industry who might be listening in now or see us later on. I think Richard brought up a very good point. One of the biggest problems with ICTs at the front lines of climate change is the battery issue. You might be able to give a farmer a smartphone or a tablet, but to charge that piece of equipment is very difficult. So there's a wish list on my list, which is a kind of a tablet where you have a screen on one side and you flip it around. There are photovoltaic cells on the other, and when you run out, you just turn the tablet over and put it in the sun. Now, how do you get a connection? I'm very encouraged by Project Loon that has been put up by Google. So if anyone from Google is listening, this is a message for you. I saw your payload that's hanging from your balloon. What I hope you can do is add a small camera onto the payload that looks down, because one of the biggest problems we have where climate change is concerned, not so much with emissions, but with the destruction of the rainforests and other forests, is that it takes us years, members of the public anyway, to see cuttings, whereas your balloon is going to be floating up there at 60,000 feet, and you hang a balloon up there with a camera below it, we're going to see falling or illegal falling of the forest pretty quickly. So I hope you will put a few more ounces onto your payload, and that will be a great help to a lot of people who are working on climate change, especially with regards to deforestation and pollution of different kinds. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the suggestion. Gabby?
I have a question. For everyone here in the panel, when you try to bring an ICT application to people, what would you say is the biggest challenge? Getting institutions to agree to all the changes that are necessary after it, okay, or getting individuals who have some biases against ICTs for whatever reason to accept the new technology. So just to make my example a little bit clearer, I just came back from a Central Asian country where they would like to use ICTs, but it seems that it's difficult to get the institutions to coordinate data sharing so that they can use the information more effectively, especially for applications that require cross-sharing of data. So there, at the institutional level, there needs to be some kind of memorandum of understanding or agreement across ministries. But even at the individual level, almost everyone at that meeting that I had gone to had their own cell phone or iPhone or tablet. So they were using ICTs, but somehow they couldn't translate it into their own work, to use ICTs to improve their work. This is not true for all members of the people at that workshop. There were just some who had difficulty translating it into what they can do personally with it. And so I found that interesting, that on one level you have individuals who are saying, oh no, it's too expensive, it's a waste of energy, I can do things manually anyhow, why do I need to use ICT? And on the other hand, you have at a higher level a need for institutions to talk to each other and share costs, share instruments, share information. So from your experience, which should we work at first, individuals or the organizations?
Any thoughts?
Well, I could add an element from my own experience. I think it's both. I mean, it's not just the individual. If the individual is not enabled to understand how these technologies can be useful, then it's going to be difficult to get institutions to move ahead. But in order to make the transformation, the leap to, let's say, greater use of ICT, whether it's for climate action, which we're talking about now, or whether it's to introduce a more efficient form of service delivery in government, or a service delivery on the private sector through e-commerce, for example. A lot of it depends on how much the government supports, let's say, the diffusion of ICT, the diffusion of new ideas, supports innovation in science and technology, and in particular allows for an open business environment. The countries that are most successful in terms of deploying ICT, and we've got some examples around the table, literally Malaysia is a very good example with the multimedia super corridor, and of course Korea is an extremely good example with not only what's been done within that country, but through its flagship companies such as Samsung, LG, and others. My belief is that it really depends on the enabling environment that may exist, that will encourage innovation, investment, and the open sharing of ideas based on sound research and development. And these two countries, Malaysia and certainly Korea and Thailand as well, and many others in the Asia-Pacific region, are the focus of innovation of a nature we haven't seen in such concentrations for an awful long time. So indeed, it's now Asia Pacific that is going to be driving the world economy, and a lot of that's going to depend on ICT, and it's going to depend on having the right conditions under which ICT can grow and thrive. So if you have those conditions, then people will see an interest in acquiring the skills required to develop that market and that opportunity, because it is, I think, a business opportunity as well as being a development need. And things will happen. I mean, the countries where I've been, where there's the greatest resistance to change, are the ones that are the poorest, the least able to get their act together, and where governance, which underpins decision-making, is the poorest. Ultimately, it's the person at the top who takes a decision because nobody else is trusted to take those decisions. And when that happens, there's a massive bottleneck and nothing gets done. So that's my view of how things happen. And to some extent, it applies even at the local and community level. One of the issues we've seen in some countries, we saw it actually I remember my first discussion in Indonesia about using ICTs and the internet, which took place in 1992. The members of the ruling party said, we don't want the internet because it's going to allow the CIA to spy on us. And now Indonesia, of course, makes extensive use of the internet. So people's ideas change, but openness to new ideas and ways of doing things, I think, is extremely important. And it underpins the ability to harness technology, whether it's ICT or otherwise, for development. And development not just from a national development perspective, but self-fulfillment from the individual and professional perspective as well.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody would like to add to that?
Gabby, maybe just a suggestion to, not so much a direct reply to your question. If the UN is developing solutions, I hope that the solutions will always be developed under the copyleft regime, where they'll be available without cost. One of the difficulties of adopting ICTs is actually the cost, not the short-term cost, but the long-term cost. For example, using GPS maps, the amount of money you pay sometimes to just get hold of a good map is beyond the reach of many governments even. So I hope that what the UN is working on will always be under the copyleft regime and be made available to us under the open source system of granting rights to use.
Thank you.
On that issue of cost, may I jump in on related work? I'm not promoting anybody's work in particular. I'm just giving examples that are particularly interesting at the moment. So the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, they are encouraging the formation of a regional consortium that will be involved in doing downscaling climate futures. This is a little bit important because every effort at downscaling is quite intensive in terms of computer resources. And it's because to do it properly, one needs to run several models at the same time, several scenarios at the same time. It can take months even to finish just one run. And so developing countries usually don't have access to the kind of expertise that is required to even do this modeling work. So ADB is encouraging the institutions around Asian Pacific who can do this to come together, and then the results of the model run will be put onto a portal. And that means that other countries, sectors, in research institutions, universities, can access the results, and they don't have to rerun what has already been done. So then we will have an efficiency in terms of using resources. We're going to be pooling it together. Let's pool our outputs together, and then make it accessible to the public already as a result. And I'm hoping that this will be successful, because this will mean that more efforts can be done towards using the results for adaptation, and because this will inform adaptation. And so the initial cost will be the same for each one. And if someone already takes on that cost, they just have to share it, and nobody else has to incur it again. So this is something that's being pushed at the regional level, and we're going to try to kickstart it in the next couple of years. So please watch out for this if you're interested in adaptation specifically. And then on the side of disaster management, when we use ICTs, we also are very conscious of cost. Early warning systems are going to be quite difficult to set up, because a country may have a large territory to cover, and then you will have to have monitoring parts for your system, and then you have the warning dissemination part of the system. And then it's not unusual for some of our towers or tsunami dart buoys or automatic weather stations to be vandalized, or parts of it stolen, perhaps for resale. Okay, so then there's an investment there that can potentially be wasted. It keeps getting dismantled. And so what is important for institutions who are setting up systems is that they also have to get the communities that will be living around the instruments to understand what they're for and how they're actually benefiting from it by its presence there, and they're receiving warning from the system as a whole. And then sometimes what we do is that we get volunteers from the community to make sure that the instruments are working well, and that they can even protect the instruments. And and they can get a little bit of a stipend for this, or some kind of support for the community. So then it's got to be seen as an integrated whole, where it's not just the work of scientists and disaster managers to look at early warning systems, but we share the benefit, and we also share the cost and the effort with the communities as well, so that they understand that they have a role even in the integrity of the system. I'm not sure if I'm making my point clear, but it's something that we have to realize. There's no free lunch, but if a lot of people are sharing the cost, then the cost comes down to a smaller amount per person. Basically, that's the idea I want to drive across.
Okay, thanks. Okay, just one quick question and answer from Manoj. Okay, Manoj, I don't think we can hear you, but he wants to ask, what are some ICT-related solution for a country like Nepal where flash flood occurs regularly? Anybody just quickly want to answer that before we turn to comments and questions from the viewers?
Maybe I can attempt something here and try to answer it in some of the chat exchanges with Manoj. And Gabby mentioned this as well in the example she gave about the city she's working in. Wireless sensor networks can be used. They can take advantage of mobile communication frequencies and signals. And essentially what they are devices that can sense physical and or chemical and or logical information. An example of logical information is you come close to an object and it registers your presence because you have a sensor that communicates with it. So that's a sort of on-off, in-out type of logic. But in this particular case, it's physical. In other words, it's water levels, soil humidity, and so on that are measured by sensors that are available on the marketplace. And I've just indicated on the right here a company called Libelium, which is a Spanish company that produces open source modules, sensors that can be programmed to respond to specific needs, and that can register a variety of different environmental inputs. As I said, whether they're physical and or chemical and or logical. So those types of solutions are now becoming more prevalent, and under circumstances where the risk is high in terms of financial cost and implications and lives and so on, then the value of developing the capacity to use these technologies becomes I mean, the business case is pretty straightforward. So I would think that you might want to look a little bit more at what's happening on wireless sensor networks. There's a massive community of researchers working on this around the world, and I can give you some further information that you can take a look at. But it's highly relevant to the question you have at hand, and it is cutting-edge stuff. There's a lot happening on this. I'm looking at information from one of my research reports here, sensor data platforms to watch. Companies are using sensor networks in one fashion or another. IBM is much involved in this. There's a company that allows you to post information you collect from wireless sensor networks or from portable devices like cell phones. You can attach a Geiger counter to a cell phone and register that data and exchange it. So that if you live in Japan, for example, after Fukushima, and you didn't believe what the government was saying about the actual levels, you could actually measure it yourself. And if there's a network of people doing this, the data can be placed on a website, and it was. So you get a map showing actual registered information in terms of radioactivity that you've measured and others like you have measured versus what the government is telling you. So there's a variety of different technologies that can be used here that are highly relevant to the question of flood monitoring and also monitoring any other Earth-based risk or natural phenomena.
Great, thanks. Okay, now we'll turn to comments and questions from the viewers. I believe we have 2 questions. Kirill, can you share them with us?
Okay, let me check here. We've actually got 2 questions, 2 to 3 questions from our viewers on YouTube. One is from Ankit Greg, and what he's asking is, what are the models and best practices for Asia? Specifically, for example, ISO 50001 energy management standards for how, I mean, like 50,000 sun standards. Is it actually useful for countries in Asia Pacific to adopt standards like that? This is ISO 50001. It's quite specific. Energy management. Anybody here familiar with it?
No. What is the question again? The question is the role of ICT in relationship to this?
Yeah. The question specifically is they're looking at what models and best practices are applicable to Asia. And specifically, for example, standards like ISO 50001 on energy management. So they're asking, like, are there any standards or best practices related to energy management that can be used for or applied in Asia Pacific?
Well, there's an awful lot of work being done on energy efficiency and the use of ICT in all types of control devices. There's a major push to make ICTs themselves more energy efficient. We see that with cell phones today, which are increasingly more energy efficient in the sense that their batteries can last all day and longer. And there's an awful lot of effort being done in terms of microprocessors to make them more energy efficient. So there's a lot happening on that score. And then there's an awful lot of research being done on energy efficiency enabled through ICT. And that would be, for example, through the use of smart grids, smart buildings, smart transportation, and even through the use of ICT-based smart designs. For example, the use of computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing have a very significant potential to help also reduce energy use and consumption. And one real expression of this is what's known as building information modeling. It's a form of software made by a company or companies such as Autodesk in the US, which allows you to create in 3 dimensions a building and to use environmental variables in order to reduce the energy footprint, energy and carbon footprints of the building. There's a whole bunch of technology and data that is available to architects in order for them to do that. So there's an awful lot happening on this score, and it's in terms of Asia Pacific, well, Asia Pacific is in the lead in terms of using energy efficiency technologies. The investments in China in clean technologies, which are energy efficient technologies among others, including renewable energy technologies, are the highest of any country in the world. So Asia Pacific, along with it's not just China, Korea is also an extremely good example of smart energy management technologies and the rollout and development and rollout of these technologies. So there's an awful lot happening there. In terms of specifically that standard, which I'm not familiar with, I can't say, but it's clear that ICTs, one of the big advantages of ICT is enhanced process efficiency, and secondly, that means instead of taking an hour to do something, you can do it in a much shorter period of time, and of course that means less energy is consumed. But all kinds of electrical devices today are becoming increasingly more intelligent through the use of microprocessors, smart grid, cloud computing, the whole bit. And that ends up in some very significant reductions in energy consumption. Indeed, it is estimated that, according to the Global Sustainability Initiative based in Europe, that ICTs can help to contribute to energy, reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions by between 15% and 20%. And I suspect it's probably a lot higher, because we're just at the beginning of using these technologies to reduce energy consumption, so increase energy efficiency, and as well to make better use of renewable energy.
Yeah, so specifically on this, I guess it's a huge range. Are there any specific starting points that somebody, for example, trying to learn more about all these standards and initiatives that you've just raised for us, for the public to visit?
Yeah, I think a good starting point will be Module 10 that's coming out from the APC ICT that Gabby and I worked on, and because it provides a summary of some of those some of the key issues. But there's also, I mean, the difficulty with ICT and energy efficiency is that really there's no very good summary of what's happening or what needs to be done. And I think that is the challenge. There's no one agency that is at the lead of looking at how these technologies can have a significant impact. The two organizations that are, I think, the most relevant in this matter are the Global Green Growth Institute based in Korea, which is actually looking at how countries can use clean technologies, of which ICT, in my belief, are extremely important, to promote green growth, which means a more sustainable form of energy use would have to be considered, and ICT will have a significant role to play in achieving that in the form of smart processes, smart technologies like smart grid and smart buildings, smart transportation system, dematerialization, building information modeling. All of these different technologies have to come together, but nobody's really looked at the whole mix. The other group that's doing some key work on this would be the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which was one of the largest development research institutions in the world with about 2,500 people, and they're located in Paris. And then the usual suspects would also be of relevance here, which would be various research centers and institutes, and various development agencies, not the least of which would be the World Bank. But I believe that this is a significant opportunity, but I don't know of that many institutions that are focusing on the whole mix. They're looking at some very specific aspects of it, but bringing it all together, I don't know of anybody that's doing this. The great hope is that through the COP mechanism, the Conference of the Parties mechanisms of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, there will be funds put aside to deal with issues of energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emission reduction, and the displacement of fossil fuels with renewables, and the technology transfer that requires. So the Green Climate Fund will help to achieve that. But there's other mechanisms that can be used, such as putting a price on carbon, and that's already happening through various carbon markets. But nobody's brought it all together. The closest, in my opinion, that a document that does that is Module 10 from the APC ICT.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So I guess this module upcoming from you and APC ICT would be one of the resources for people to start.
Yes, that's correct. Indeed, I also did a similar report for the ITU, but the ITU is not interested in it because ITU is interested in telecoms, and they're not so much interested in the broader aspects of ICTs for development, which is really quite unfortunate because that document goes into a lot of detail about what could be done and what technologies could be brought to bear in using ICTs. But the fact of the matter is there's really no single source of information on this, and the exception perhaps of Module 10, because it synthesizes a considerable amount of information that's out there. And I spent a good year and a half just researching it. And there's an awful lot happening. Right? We've got issues such as the Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communications, the power of mobile technologies to transform lives in a broad sense, but as a very strong and very important tool for climate action. Mobile technology is going to be a dramatic game changer, especially when 3G and 4G becomes much more prevalent than it is today. And so I think that there's an awful lot that needs to be done, and that we will not achieve, first of all, we will not achieve the 2°C break-off point beyond which catastrophic change may occur when we hit 3°, 4°C increments in global surface temperatures as a result of fossil fuel emissions. The only way we can really affect significant change and avert catastrophic consequences that are well outlined in some of the baseline documentation, such as the various reports that have been produced recently on the impacts of inaction in terms of climate impacts. The only way we can really address these issues is by using ICTs to a much greater extent. Without ICTs, we will have catastrophic global change as a result of a changing and warming climate. But the research that needs to be done and the technology transfer upon which averting this catastrophe depends is not in place.
Okay, so thank you, Richard, for that very detailed answer. So yeah,
Can I jump in here?
Gabby has something to put into this. Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead, Gabby.
In addition to what Richard had said, there are some other good lessons to be taken from the ICT sector itself. If you buy a new laptop nowadays, you'll see little stickers on it that say Energy Star Rating or EPEAT. So I'm typing something into the chat window now. EPEAT.net is a global registry for greener electronics. And there are Asia-Pacific countries that are included in this EPEAT system. So it's voluntary. And then what joining up means that you're going to be committed to reducing the use of toxins in manufacturing and to make sure that energy use by the object itself is more efficient. And so EPEAT has some standards that you can look at. And then they also register companies, manufacturing companies. So then these companies have to be committed to efficient use of energy and minimizing their ecological footprint and the ecological impact. So you can, the viewer who is interested can check out the standards of EPEAT. The Energy Star Rating system is also following a similar logic where you want to have more efficient energy products, energy using products, and so it's an international standard. They can see which countries are also using this standard. But more importantly, it's not just about the standards, but about the regulations, or at least self-regulation by different industries. So ICTs is doing this for the sector, no? For its own sector. But what about hotels and tourism facilities? They usually have their air conditioning on too low, and it's like set at 16 to 18 degrees sometimes in some hotels. It's really freezing for some people. But somehow hotels don't always realize that they're not really doing their customers a service by keeping the air conditioning on so much. So within the hotel and tourism sector industry, they're also having discussions on how to improve their own energy efficiency. And so there's some self-learning going on and self-teaching, peer-to-peer teaching within the sector. So it's not just the general standard for all, but also getting different sectors to adopt the standards and then going to some kind of self-regulation.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. Finally, we have a second, and I think it's our last question, given our time left for the panel. The second question is from Francois Fortier. He's saying, his question is related to Chin's, is how can social media be used to record individual commitments at household, organizational, and community levels, and how can social media help encourage others to make more commitments, such as lower cooling that was just highlighted by Gabrielle just now.
Hi, could I just begin by going back to the previous question? If I may echo what seems to be the subtext of that question, which is that while we are promoting ICT as a solution, we are also part of the problem because we are consuming a lot of energy. And in addition to that, we have not talked about e-waste, but it is a big problem. There are thousands and thousands of computers have been dumped in the third world, and batteries are leaking from all these machines. So we will have to address that problem, yeah. And the manufacturing of new ICTs continue to be very toxic, parts of it. So I think we have to recognize that while we may be the solution, we are also part of the problem. Coming back to the other question that's for me, how do we use social media to, I don't get the exact gist of the question. How do we use that to register commitment? It's a tough one. I think I'll turn, sorry, Carol?
Yeah, I have a feeling it's, and I'm actually following Francois on the channel, but, well, it's related to the pervasiveness of mobile phones, especially smartphones, in the sense that people, as an example, in Malaysia, we actually use specific hashtags in the recent elections in which people updated their voting status, for example. So it was actually used as a form. Twitter and hashtags were actually used as a form of data collection in terms of votes cast across the nation. So in this way, if I'm not mistaken, Francois also say that there might be actually a possibility here in using status updates and specific hashtags, for example, temperature, like temperature and date, to actually be able to collect information from social media through the use of smartphones, in addition to GPS locations as well. So
that's
what
a
are
great
the
suggestion. So I've learned from that question. Actually, I don't have an answer to it, but what I've seen is that really the front lines of climate change effects, the farmers, the people who live in the forest, just the simple cell phone of getting messages out has been very powerful. And I don't think it's so much a matter of commitment. They live it, they face the crisis. I think it is a way of getting those of us who are outside the front lines committed to their cause, to their issues. Yeah. But having said that, again, I'd like to come back to the issue of censorship. I noticed that the social media in recent times has been used by regulators to crack down on people who advocate for various causes. So I hope that we will be given the space of social media to continue to do our work without this kind of crackdowns that definitely will silence the social media. And we're going to all pay for it at some point, because you're not going to get good information coming out from the front lines if you do that.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Yes, I was just going to say that I was just looking through my knowledge base here for the example, but social networking has been extremely useful, mostly because of the geopositioning information. For example, there's a Wave, I think that's the name of it. Google just purchased a company that crowdsources maps. We're all familiar with Google Maps, or maybe most of us are. Google Maps is sort of driven by Google, whereas this company, and I'm just trying to get the name of it, I think it's Wave. I'm just looking for my
it's Waze.
Waze. There you go. W-A-Z-E. Waze has just been purchased, or is in the process of being purchased by Google, and its benefit is that it allows to get very accurate maps of cities. It's mostly for urban applications, and in real time, so that you can plan your transit based on the data you collect on your cell phone in the car, okay, or using your GPS-based device in your vehicle. So it'll tell you that there's an agglomeration of cell phone users who are using Facebook to report their status, or Twitter, whatever it is, saying, I'm stuck in traffic, avoid this route. So you can do traffic planning on the basis of global positioning using mobile technologies, which are a form of sensor, as I mentioned, sensor networks. Well, the most useful form of sensor network is the mobile phone today, because everybody has one, or a lot of people have them. So in this particular case, the data being sensed are the quotes from people over time. So if you get an awful lot of GPS traffic over time that comes from one particular location, then you know there's a traffic blockage there. Now, if you add to that cell phone a variety of other different sensors, then you can get a variety of other data elements, for example, pollution levels and so on. But that's not so much relevant to social networks. Social networks are useful for that particular purpose. I mentioned the geopositioning. They're also useful for getting rapid feedback and for crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing via social networks is extremely useful in order to, if you can channel develop a social network media and marketing strategy focused on climate action. And crowdsourcing allows you to do that. And social media in general allows you to do that. So you use a social media, because many people in particular use Facebook. Then you develop a strategy that is focused on, okay, How do we report potholes? Well, you might develop a page that's, like potholes in Kuala Lumpur. So, people can register their comments and that information can be made available. Or you can just use, and we're seeing actually, even within some of the multilateral agencies, they're advertising for people with social media skills to help them develop strategies in the delivery of development services, international development services. I believe the same is possible in terms of dealing with climate action and sustainability issues by thinking creatively about how social media can be used through a marketing campaign and or for data gathering and or for collecting information through crowdsourcing type of behaviors and applications to great benefit. And so social media is extremely useful. Social media is also useful for sharing information. I use a social media tool. I have 2 monitors. That's why I prefer using a desktop, because I have several monitors at the same time. On my monitor to the right here of my main screen, I have Evernote. Evernote is a cloud-based knowledge management application where I put all kinds of information of relevance to my interests and my research. But I can share any of these. I have over 220 notebooks. I have over 5,600 references. I can share this globally or individually with a variety of different people. So a social networking application such as Evernote, which is focused on knowledge management, can also be used to help as part of a social marketing strategy, a social media-based mix of applications and tools to promote climate action. There's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done on this, and Francois, who's now in Songdo City out in Incheon in Korea, is in a good position to start looking at how these tools and technologies might be appropriate to dealing with issues related to sustainability, sustainable development in general.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and I hope that answers your question, Francois. I'm now gonna, we don't have any more questions, so I'm just now gonna hand it over to Christine, who will wrap things up.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Before we wrap, I'd like to ask the panelists to each give one recommendation or one key takeaway to those who are using ICTs to tackle climate change issues. Just really quick, one key takeaway from each of you. Let's start with, on the right, with Chin.
Hi, I would ask somebody to start a map, and just for every tree cut down, somebody should send an MSS to this one website, and this one tree cut will automatically be placed on a map somewhere.
Thanks.
I would say think creatively about energy efficiency and ICTs. Yes, more ICTs mean more energy consumption, but the benefits, the enabling potential of ICTs when it comes to energy efficiency are very considerable. And so think of it in terms of applications. And if you're looking for a career, this is a career that I would pursue if I was in your position, and a lot younger than I am presently. Thank you.
Thanks. Noj? Sorry, I think we can't hear you. We'll move to Gabby, and then we'll. And Binosh, you can type what you want to say. I can say it to the group, but Gabby.
Well, I'd like to address the future young kids that'll be watching this channel and listening to what we old fogies have been saying. The future is in your hands, and ICTs help us think about what's going to happen later on, and what's going to happen in terms of our climate and what impact this will be on our lives, our safety, our future livelihood. And it's up to you to think of what's next. Yeah? The world is yours later on, and so please, you think and you tell us what has to be done next. Thanks.
Chensu?
Yes. Lastly, I want to point out the 2 things. Today, I think I personally agree on a lot of benefits from the ITC in terms of the climate change issue, but I want to add one thing. We also need to carefully consider about the security of the ICT frameworks. So which is also a very important issue. And the other one is the flexibility of the piece of information. ICT is very growing fast of the technology, but with that the formats, a lot of different pieces of information gonna be changed. So those flexibility of the information in terms of sustainability must be considered as well.
Thank you everyone. So we've come to the end of the Hangout, and I'd like to thank the panelists for taking the time to share their insights and experience with us. Personally, it's been an eye-opener for me. I've learned a lot, and I hope the viewers have as well. And I'd like to thank the viewers for watching and for their questions and comments. So the recording of this live broadcast will be available on the e-DIRAP YouTube channel in a day or so, and there'll also be a written summary of the discussions today. Now, next month, e-DIRAP will be focusing on open government, and we'll be having a Hangout at the end of July. So please join us for that as well. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.